We are joined today by Russell Texas Bentley. Russell Bentley is an American who in 2014 moved to Donetsk, the Donetsk People's Republic in eastern Ukraine, and he has been literally on the front lines of the conflict, the proxy war going on there. Russell has a YouTube channel in which he has posted videos of what life is like there in the Donbass region. For those who are just listening and not watching, here we are playing some of his video clips.
Hey, my name is Russell Bentley. My soldier name is Tejas. We're starting a new program with the Sud Vermini Information Unit. It's going to be called Donbass with Tejas. This position we're at today, our first program, little town of Spartak, near the airport, just north and east of Donetsk City. This is one of my old positions called a blizna, means fishhook. It's a hot position. It sticks out into the U-crop lines, surrounded on three sides. To the north, 2 kilometers, major U-crop army base, Polish army, Pravi sector Nazis, U.S. and EU mercenaries. We've heard them on the U-crop army frequencies, so we know they're there. This is a very hot position. A lot of guys been hit here, and we've done some hitting back too. And we're going to keep doing it.
So Russell, or Texas, as he's earned the nom de guerre on the front lines. Russell, can you just explain, where are you? Where do you live right now? And what's the situation that's going on?
Well, first of all, I want to thank both of you guys for having me on. You guys have an excellent program, and I'm real happy and proud to be with you guys today. I came to Donetsk in December of 2014. I immediately joined the Vostok Battalion, and on December 31st, 2014, I was on the front lines at the Donetsk airport in a very heavy combat position that happened to be a convent that was about 400 meters from the new terminal of the Donetsk airport. I served as a soldier, combat soldier, for about 8 months in Vostok Battalion, and then in Han Spetsnaz Battalion. And then, when I came here, I was 54. Once I joined that Spetsnaz Battalion, I started realizing I might be a little bit too old for ninja acrobatics. And so I suggested that I might be more useful as a information warrior, a war correspondent, and anti-propagandist. So I started doing that in 2015. I started with the Donbass Humanitarian Aid, a human aid fund that I started with my godmother, who's a native of Donetsk, but now lives in the States. And since then, in 2017, I worked for 4 months on the Avdiivka front as basically a military policeman, but my real job was soldier, frontline soldier. But other than that, so I spent about a year on the front. And other than that, I've been doing humanitarian aid and trying to do as much counter propaganda and, reporting on the truth of what's happening here ever since. I'm a citizen of the DPR, soon to get my Russian passport, and I'm married here. I have a home, and I'm planning on living here the rest of my life because I really love it here.
Before we get into what's been happening in recent weeks, which has led to this escalation, where the so-called steady state that's now in the White House has gotten things so unsteady on the frontiers of Russia, and deliberately so. I wanted to just ask you about how you see the conflict there, because watching your videos, you frame the conflict in terms of anti-fascism and almost a sort of continuation of World War II. I mean, some of the fighters that you've been in the trenches with there in Donetsk have said the same, that this is, their families lived through World War II and they're living through similar situations. So maybe you can kind of articulate the conflict as you see it for our viewers.
Well, when I say that it's a conflict against fascism, First of all, in Ukraine during the Second World War under German occupation, there was a significant segment of Ukrainians that became Nazi collaborators under this dude named Stefan Bandera. And I mean, Bandera wore a SS uniform. He was responsible for some of the most, horrendous atrocities, including Babi Yar. Here in Donetsk, there's a mine that had a 360-meter vertical shaft. And in 700 days of occupation, the German Nazis, with the help of the Banderisti collaborators, threw 75,000 people down that shaft. So, I mean, you can understand, the scope of the brutality. I mean, the absolute genocide. And, yep, that's Bandera right there. And, so when the Russian Red Army came through here, cleaned out Ukraine, liberated Ukraine, a lot of these Banderistas ran back west to Berlin, and very many of them ended up in the United States and particularly in Canada. And they're now. Chrystia Freeland, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, is the granddaughter of a Nazi collaborator, a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator. And she's certainly doing her best to continue on with, where he was coming from back then. So
yeah, she actually said she was proud of her grandfather, and she claimed that when this was exposed actually by communists in Canada, she said that it was all Russian disinformation. It was a Russian propaganda plot, even though it's objective. Like it's an undeniable fact that Chrystia Freeland's grandfather not only was a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator, but he ran a pro-Nazi propaganda newspaper that was taken over, that had previously been it was a printing press that was owned by Jews, and they took the printing press, sent the Jews to extermination camp, and made it a Nazi newspaper.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about fighting against fascists here too, it's important to understand that we're not just talking about Ukrainian fascists, because what the United States has become is basically the Fourth Reich. When you consider that, Mussolini supposedly said that fascism should be called corporatism because it is the merger of state and corporate power. Now, there's some dispute about whether he said it or not, but there's absolutely no question that is exactly the perfect definition of fascism. There's another thing you can find on the internet. It's called the 14 Characteristics of Fascism, and both Ukraine and the United States, and coming along quite quickly, Canada and England too, and a lot of the EU, they fit almost every one of them. So the important thing to understand is that Ukraine is a colony of the United States. Nothing happens in Ukraine without the permission and direction of the people that control the U.S. government now. And the important thing to remember about that is, we understand that when Maidan happened and the famous Victoria Nuland intercepted phone call, everybody said, oh, it's, she said, F the EU, and so that was like the big scandal. But that missed the whole point, that what she was talking to Pyatt about, who was the U.S. ambassador, was deciding exactly who for exactly what office of the Ukrainian government. And all the people that she said in that phone call ended up in exactly the positions that she directed them to be in. So, Nuland worked for Clinton's Secretary of State. She worked for Biden. Obama called him, and Biden called himself the point man in Ukraine from 2014 until the end of the Obama administration. And so here's the important thing to understand about that. It was Biden who directed the rebels of Maidan to get those Georgian snipers to shoot the protesters and the cops. 100 people were murdered by snipers in Maidan in Kiev. Nobody really knows, the Ukrainian courts have never place the blame on anybody, although they say it was the Berkut, which is, of course, a lie. But there are Georgian snipers, mercenaries, who came forward and said that they were paid. They named names. They said exactly where they were, who gave the orders, and the orders were to shoot protesters and cops, just to escalate the level of violence. That could not, and that was on the Hotel Ukraine, which was at that time, whole floors of it were being like rented out and controlled and occupied by CIA and U.S. Secret Services. So the U.S. has been responsible for everything that happened. Biden personally was the leader of the U.S. policy in Ukraine when the Maidan snipers murdered 100 people, when in May 2nd of 2014, the Odessa massacre, where they brought in a bunch of neo-Nazis that burned alive an unknown number of people, but certainly scores of people that were burned alive, beaten to death, and murdered in Odessa for peacefully protesting against this coup. And then again, you understand that also in 2014 was MH17 shot down, the Dutch airline or the Malaysian airline with all the Dutch people on it. That's now being a kangaroo court in The Hague in Amsterdam. But this is all Biden's work, you know. And I mean, he was a very evil, dangerous dude back then. I mean, obviously now, you know, he can't even find his own ass with both hands. He's completely senile. But the people that controlled him back then and are now again in power. So, I mean, Biden is the guy who instructed him. He was here 2 days before they started the official ATO, anti-terrorist operation, when the Ukrainian army moved against the people of Donbass. And in the first days of that operation, civilians were literally standing in front of tanks and BMPs, you know, holding their hands like the dude in Tiananmen Square, and they were getting run over and shot. And so they said, okay, you know, if we can't ask, you know, for reason, if we can't ask for compassion, then we'll fight, you know. And really, you know, they say, you know, a lot of people say, oh, it's just rhetoric to call them Nazis and stuff. No, it's not. Nazi is as Nazi does. And these guys are just as vicious, just as brutal. You know, there's a video from Marinka, which is about 3 miles from where I'm at right now. And when Zelensky was on the front there recently, they were flying the Wehrmacht flag, you know, the red flag with the swastika in the middle. They were flying.
I tweeted video of that, and we'll throw it in post. That was the position that Zelensky had visited, and it was the flag of the German Nazi army flying. I guess they were taunting the positions of the Donbass brigades, the what we would refer to in the U.S. as pro-Russian separatists.